It's July now, so I guess it's finally time to talk about June, which was interesting. Hello, welcome, I am Pete. This is the Ponderings of Pete. I talk about fantasy books mostly, as well as some sci-fi and some other stuff occasionally. If you are new here, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. There's a like button, a subscribe button, and then also the comment box as well. If you've read any of these books or interested in any things I talk about, please tell me, talk to me. I made this channel to talk about books, so feel free to leave a comment down below. If you are coming back, hello again. Thank you for just, supporting me, coming back, and watching more of my videos. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate all the interaction and everything that you guys say. So, July. June. Now is July. June is what we're talking about. I had a little bit of a reading slump in June. And then most of the books I read in June, I actually am going to have reviews out, or do have reviews out for them. So it's a really short list. I read 4 proper books, 2 short stories, and a bunch of article-like content, essentially, that was cherry-picked from a bunch of places. The first half of the month, I just kind of slumped. I just wasn't feeling like delving into a serious story. I was playing a bunch of video games, reading specifically a lot of campaign stuff for D&D, specifically Eberron stuff, because I will be running a campaign in Eberron soon. 5th edition, not 3.5. I'm using these purely for the lore, although that's a 3.5 and a 4. So that is kind of like the article-like content. I was reading just a bunch of different stuff from a bunch of different books, listening to a lot of the Keith Baker podcasts, reading his website, so just consuming a lot of the lore. And I'm finally able to use some of these Eberron books that I've been collecting because I've wanted to run a campaign in Eberron for a while. The short stories that kind of got me out of my slump, I was feeling kind of down, and then I started playing a game called The Sinking City. And there are a lot of references to H.P. Lovecraft in that thing. Like, within the first 10 minutes, I got through 10 minutes of the game. And I was like, I've found 4 references that I kind of know what they're to, but I don't really understand them. So I'm going to go read some H.P. Lovecraft. And it was wonderful. H.P. Lovecraft is a delight in its own way. Like, it's kind of weird to say that, but, like, I really like the vibe that he has sometimes, where it's just, down, depressing, cosmic, and crazy. Shadow over Innsmouth and Dunwich Horror were the 2 that I read because those were 2 of the primary references. And I was like, I need to read his famous stuff. I do have like a compendium that's like all the stuff he's written, and I was gonna try to read that through like story by story chronologically. And then I was like, nah, let's just read the big stuff, and I'll get to the little stuff later. Of the 2, I think I like Shadow over Innsmouth more. Dunwich Horror was definitely like actually creepier because you have the weird hick stuff going on. I was kind of just made uncomfortable by some of that. I liked the cosmic stuff that he introduced. I don't know if I really want to, do I want to spoil this 100-year-old story? And then Shadow over Innsmouth was just kind of felt like a lot of little elements, had a lot more influence on the 10 minutes of the game that I played. And I really liked the twist at the end of that. That was really cool. Tells you a lot about what his mindset is a little bit with the twist. For both of them, honestly. The twist for Dunwich wasn't really a twist. It was just a big reveal. I liked the monster in Dunwich Horror. That was really cool. Definitely gave me Stranger Things vibes. But I definitely knew that, the monsters in Stranger Things feel like they're called D&D things. They're not D&D things. They're definitely very heavily H.P. Lovecraft influenced. Which is kind of why I like Stranger Things. No, I have not seen the latest season. I am working on it. I don't currently have Netflix, but we'll see. That was H.P. Lovecraft. Really enjoyed it. Next up, let's talk about my 2 self-published books that I read this month for SBFBO. We first have The Merchant Prince, which, review up here. I reviewed it. It's for SBFBO. This one, I wasn't necessarily a fan of the villain because of some of the things about the villain. This was the most Daniel Abraham-like book that I saw on the list, so that's kind of why it interested me in the first place. All in all, it was a decent story. I felt like it honestly should have been longer. And I think that's the thing I'm coming across with the book I'm reading now as well, where I feel like there just could be so much more to this story, but the book's just going by so fast. and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like there might be a pressure on self-published authors to keep their books short to get more people to read them, right? And that makes sense because it's self-published. There's a little bit of a stigma on it, which is sad. And because of this perception, people are less willing to jump into a longer book that they haven't heard that much about, which is usually the case with self-publishing. My personal opinion is if you're going to write a book, make it the length it needs to be. But that also comes from a perspective of, if I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a book to share a story with people, not necessarily to make a boatload of money right off. Like there is a want to make money writing books. And I'd rather write the stories as they need to be than sacrifice a lot in the story in order to please a lot of people. So we'll see if that actually translates later on in my life, but that's my thoughts. Anyways, Merchant Prince. Pick it up if you are vaguely a fan of Dave Abraham. I won't say he is Dave Abraham because he's not. I wouldn't say there's definitely not a lack of action in this book because there are very significant scenes with a bunch of action in them. It's definitely very merchant, political, backstabby stuff. If you want to know more, check out my review. The second book was Heir to the Sun, which was also very enjoyable. A little bit more tropey than Merchant Prince, but I think the author did the tropes well. Portal fantasy. This one also, the ending, I wasn't the biggest fan of, but in a different way, but still very enjoyable. Again, check out the review that I have above. They're definitely both worth a read, so inquire more. Strangely, I forgot that I actually read 3 self-published books this month, and the third one was The Rebel by J.R. Tross. This was an arc that was sent to me. This is the second book in his series, which is the Elfraver trilogy. It is about a monster hunter in a cyberpunk arcane fantasy world who is a pacifist. And she is just kind of dealing with the loss of her grandfather at the very beginning of the first book. And this second book kind of naturally continues her story, her arc. And the characters are great. The monster people, elves, are great because we get more of them in this book. And it's just a fun time. I also have a review for that one out. So, as you can tell, I was prioritizing all the books that I wanted to get reviews out for. And then the very last book that I read was The Veiled Throne by Ken Liu. This is my chunker. I love this. I also will have a review that I hopefully will link up above, depending on when I actually release, whether I do the review or the wrap-up first. I don't know which. Either way, I'm in Ireland right now, so hi. But Veiled Throne, Book 3. Definitely keep in mind that this is part 1 of a larger story, right? So Veiled Throne and Speaking Runes are part 1 and part 2 of the final book, quote unquote. But this one also felt kind of a little bit more laid back and smaller scale, because one of the main conflicts is not as huge as the huge conflicts that take place in Wall of Storms and Grace of Kings. But I still think it was a good storyline to go through, because we're following the kids of Kunikaru in this book, and we focus on Farah for the most part, even though Thera, Timu, and Fyro all make appearances. They all have the start of their arc, it felt like. That's kind of like a brief thing about Veiled Throne. I liked it. Check out the review when it comes out, or if it's already out, yada yada yada. And I think that's it for this wrap-up. I think, right? Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to get some rest, because that's important. Take vacations, because that's also important. Gosh, don't overwork yourself. Please, take care of yourself. That's what I'm saying. If you have to take a staycation, take mental health days. Take care of yourself first. Don't kill yourself for a job, because that's definitely not worth it. Have a great night.